I don't know who the gospel writers were, and nor does anyone else, actually. Likewise, I don't know when or where they wrote their gospels, and despite 200 years of scholarship, nor does anyone else. And people will tell you, oh, Matthew was written...
Wait, what? N.T. Wright, perhaps the most renowned Christian scholar of a generation, said we don't know who wrote the canonical gospels? This man is a devout Anglican bishop who taught at Ivy League schools as a professor for years. We don't know who wrote the most foundational pieces of Christian literature that exist. This is a complete bombshell to many Christians who will fight tooth and nail to refute this idea. But it seems to be the case. Many today have this idea that the Gospel of Matthew was written by the tax collector himself, and John by John, the beloved apostle, as well. Some even have this idea that they were carrying around papyri, jotting down his words as he preached. It turns out the Gospels of Matthew and John could very well have been written by people far away from Palestine, authors who never heard or saw Jesus, or even spoke to people who heard or saw Jesus. In fact, this is likely the case.
I don't know who the gospel writers were, and nor does anyone else, actually. Likewise, I don't know when or where they wrote their gospels, and despite 200 years of scholarship, nor does anyone else. And people will tell you, oh, Matthew was written in 85 AD in Syria, but we don't know that. There's no hard evidence for it, and so on and so on. It is perfectly possible that one or more of them may have been eyewitness to the events that they're writing about. But what's far more important is that the testimony of what they actually say, clearly, because it makes sense as the history of a person in the late 20s and early 30s AD, has its own authenticity, whether or not they were eyewitnesses. So the search for were they or weren't they eyewitnesses, and the quest to push or pull the Gospels into an early period or a later period, though scholars have spent years doing that, is actually not strictly the most important thing.